Well, you are
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
technically
want to
a
start off with
co-chair of its and the
primarily
Bell
questioning
Productions.
I know.
Dr. Duncan Webb asked, which was around the budget for the Ministry for Regulation. Now, the briefing we've just had from the OAG says that the Ministry for Regulation
I'm sorry, from the...
Office of Auditor General
Oh, sorry, yes.
suggests that says that the Ministry for Regulation overspent its budget by 0.9 million. What is the level of financial control in this ministry?
Well, if you think about that, even if we take that as being true...
But it was budgeted at 16 million last year and it spent 16.9 million. How is it not true?
Well, let's take it as true.
Yes.
So we're doing that. And then we say, okay, you've got a startup ministry that is transferring money between different financial years, but actually remaining well within its budget over the 4-year period, and has managed to stay within, well, help me, about 5.5% in its first year, which we made up in its second year. So I would say that's quite normal in any organisation's budgeting, and it shows very tight control in answer to your question.
Isn't part of the reason why it stayed within its budget is that it's essentially being guaranteed funding increases year on year without having to be subject through the same baseline savings targets that other ministries have had to be subject to?
Well, of course, it couldn't be subject to a baseline savings target because that would require it to have had a baseline in previous years. As a new ministry, it doesn't have a baseline to compare itself with. The second point is, yes, it does have each year for its first 4 years a $2 million increment. As it establishes itself, it finds the staff. We could have, of course, started at 22 million, which will be its final budget, but we've chosen to start it at a lower level to recognise the fact that it takes time to grow its capability. For example, it spent its first year working on material which will be used to train others throughout the public sector to be better regulators, because often people say, well, it's not so much the rules we care about, it's the way they're applied. However, that's taken some time to prepare. In future years, there might be more scope to use those resources to better educate other regulators. So we've actually chosen to start lower than where we're going to end up, increment over time as we grow our capability to do good.
So are you guaranteeing then that the overall cap for the Ministry for Regulation in terms of what its final budget will be 22 million? It won't go over that.
No, that's for the first 4 years.
Government expect it to grow beyond 22 million?
No, I don't have. You asked if I can guarantee it. I said no. I don't have any expectation, for the simple reason that future governments will set budgets, and they might budget more or they might budget less. There's no reason to think that it would be more. There's no reason to think it would be less. But it would be unfair to ask me to guarantee what a government might do in 4 years' time.
Okay, I just want to remind members that the briefings that we get from the Office of Auditor General are in confidence, and while you may be able to draw themes from them, it's the rule is that we don't quote directly from them as such. Now I'm going to go to Dr. Megan Woods. No, you're right.
Dr. Webb.
Okay.
Gee, this chair likes to interject a lot.
He does. But I mean, that is a very good point to bring up, is that like that's not supposed to be public knowledge. Like that's for in-house only. You know, the general Tom, Dick and Harry aren't supposed to know what they're saying.
I think there are other ways to refer to it without quoting from it. That was the problem. Or that might be the problem.
Yeah. I was...
Detective Rogers, if you want to be a panellist, you're welcome to join us tomorrow night. Sorry, I just had to say that.
Yeah, I was going to say Seymour is as good at skirting the question as Louise was at last night.
Maybe that's a feature of this government.
Well,
it's what Luxon tries to do, but he's not very good at it.
No.
So true.
But yeah.
It's just that Seymour's much more skilled at doing that thing and not making it look like he's doing it, if you know what I mean.
He is, and that's because the Atlas organisation teaches you how to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas Luxon probably wasn't trained by Atlas.
Yeah, well, Seymour's dangerously convincing in a way that Luxon can only dream of.
Yeah. All right. Oh no, it looks like we're jumping questioner. So let's see what happens here.
Okay, well, I might just, before you go, Duncan, I might just jump over this side to Todd Stevenson or Dan Bidwell.
Todd first, and then
good.
myself.
Okay, Todd, then we'll come back to Dr. Webb.
Good morning. Thanks for being here, Minister.
obviously we've already touched a little bit on these regulatory system reviews. You said it's about a third of the ministry's work. At the moment, there's, I think, around 6 criteria that are kind of looked at when deciding on these system reviews, things like productivity and regulatory burden, economic opportunities, social outcomes, etc. Can you tell me what you've learnt in the reviews that have happened to date, and will those criteria and framework be adjusted, and how is that informing the thinking of the ministry for the next set of reviews?
Well, I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, a lot of the changes that have been made, I don't believe would be made if the regulated party had to tell the regulator. Because often the regulator is in quite a position of power over the regulated party. I give the example of early childhood centres. I happen to be the minister responsible for that regulator, and I can tell you that we've had to really work hard on ensuring that the regulator operates well and leaves the regulated party, the early childhood centre, in a comfortable position. Nonetheless, I believe in a lot of cases, the centres and the regulated parties would not have raised the concerns for fear of the regulator, and I suspect that that's just a problem right across the regulatory environment. You could say the same thing about just about any regulator. So being someone that the regulated parties can go to means that there is now an advocate for the regulated within government, and you won't get that from the people who are regulating them. That's a conflict of interest. The criteria that we've used so far, I think, have been very sound, and we'll continue to use the same criteria for the foreseeable future. As you say, we're interested in how big is the impact on the rest of the New Zealand economy, how big is the impact of regulation on that sector, and how plausible is it that we can make improvements that will show a tangible benefit. And so at some levels, you will see, for example, the hairdressing review, actually quite a significant sector. Are they badly over-regulated? I don't believe that they were. However, counterbalancing that, we were quite easily able to remove regulatory burden and make a difference quite quickly. So that is a success for that sector, and one where, for minimal effort, we have made sure that $1 million a year will be saved in fees alone, and probably a greater amount in the inconvenience of compliance. That means that that sector review will basically pay for itself every year into the future. And it's a very good example of how this small but mighty ministry is one that is actually saving people money every year.
Okay, we just had one sup there from Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. I'm interested in the regulatory review process. Is it something you have input in as a minister, or is it something that the agency itself decides?
As a minister, I take recommendations from the ministry as to what sort of sectors we should consider, and I have some influence over that decision. I would describe it as a joint decision.
So would you say you have final sign-off on what the work program is for the regulatory reviews that are undertaken?
I wouldn't say that. It's a collaborative process. The ministry obviously gives me a lot of advice, and I take it very seriously. I guess in theory I can just override things, but I think as a minister that's unwise. Usually the people that are working full-time on a project will have very useful things to say, and you're wise to listen to them.
Okay, I'm going to go to a sup here from Ryan Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister. With regard to your framework around early childhood education, the review you've done, that's alluded to the $1 million of saving, and obviously that compounds over time. That review wasn't without some noise from the sector, but what are the key, benefits or extrapolates you've pulled from that review, not just financially, direct and indirect, but some of the other wider benefits you think have come from the benefit of this intervention?
So you're talking specifically about early childhood? Yeah. So if I was to just start with a general theme, I believe one of the reasons we have a problem with productivity in New Zealand is that we spend too much time on what might be called transactional activity, not enough time on what you might call transformational activity. It's the builder who takes longer to get consent than actually build the thing, and it's the early childhood centre operator who says, look, all I wanted to do was release the magic of young New Zealanders, and actually I spend far too much time on compliance activity, and in some cases too much time fearing the regulator. So what we've been able to do is shift them, or will do as this review is implemented, is shift them away from unnecessary compliance activity back towards more productive activity, actually unleashing the magic of young minds in this country. Now, how does that work? Well, there's basically 3 things. First of all, the rules. We found that there were 98 licensing requirements. By the time we've finished, a significant portion of those will be either gone, simplified, or transformed to guidance. Second is the way that the regulation is done. For too long, it's been very high stakes. If you miss any of these criteria, you can be shut down, when in many cases it'd be more appropriate to have a system, and it'll be a 5-step system of, well, here's a warning, here's a more serious warning, and eventually we will shut them down. If it's something very serious involving the safety of a child, we can still shut them down immediately. But a much more graduated and proportional response, and there'll also be some changes within the regulator to make them I guess, more accountable and appropriate too. So it's what are the rules, how do we enforce them, and what's the structure of the organisation enforcing them? All of those will change and give us a much more constructive relation between the regulator and the regulated, prioritising child safety while also making early childhood centres a much happier place to work.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to...
Thanks. I'm going to keep looking at how...
No, hold on. Right. No, this is making me fucking mad. I have worked.
Well, you used to work in
sector.
early childhood.
I have worked in the ECE sector. Yes, I have seen the horror stories in the news. Children being made to sleep in drawers, children being locked in rooms because they were disturbing the other kids. Children being burnt because they're allowed into the fucking kitchen while they're cooking lunch.
Well, we could talk about this. So today I was at Tui Park Kindergarten delivering the fruit this morning as part of the runs, and one of the kids, and I swear it's the second time he's done this, jumps on the front of my fold-out trolley when it's empty on its way out and wants, to get a ride. Now, he don't get that far with the ride, but it's the second time it's been done. Now, will the Ministry of Regulations... and the process that he's talking about, will it hinder or harm me if this child starts trying to do that?
See, I don't think that should be on you, though. That should be on the childcare centre.
Yeah.
Because that means that their staff are not paying proper attention to what the kids are doing.
Yeah, I've got to admit, the kid at least does it when it's not moving. He kind of cutely does it and looks at me and go you going to move now?
Okay, that is adorable, but yes, it is not necessarily safe.
Yeah.
Children can be adorable and stupid at the same time.
So true.
There seems to be, David Seymour is 100% focused on reducing compliance costs for the people who are making profit from this industry, while he's got absolutely no care about the safety or benefits to the children.
Yeah.
It's made my blood...
the machine that delivers profit for him.
Kiwi Scoot's just posted, that's made my blood boil.
Yeah.
Because I know that's happened to one of my friend's children because of the autism.
Oh.
Miramar Central Primary School.
Wow.
And I mean, it's quite a few years ago now, considering, this kid's now nearly 18. But
right.
and this has happened before I met her, but it's just but it was an issue that it made Campbell live back in the day, considering John Campbell was on Channel 3.
All of the regulations they complain about came about because someone was doing something unacceptable and getting away with it. Every regulation has been because someone's been harmed.
Yes. Regulations in any industry are to keep people safe.
Should be.
To keep the business running if something should go wrong.
To also set standards for liability for insurance companies to assess for premiums.
Exactly.
If you don't have regulations, it becomes a bit airy-fairy.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
So
and we've got another Madam Chair. Well, do we call you Madam Chair?
You can call me whatever you want.
Except for late for dinner.
No, I had dinner early tonight.
See, told you. Can't call you late for dinner.
I've just finished up with boxing, so it's okay. And then I had dinner, and now I'm here.
Oh, nice. So when I was working in the ECE sector, I was I was covering maternity leave for one of the teachers. I was going to go through and do all the training through Porsche and all of that sort of stuff, but then I realized that it wasn't what I really wanted to be doing with my life, so I didn't continue after I left that position. But the first week or so that I was there, like I'd been police vetted and all of that sort of thing, and that's how I was allowed to work there in the first place. If I hadn't been vetted, I wouldn't have been allowed to work there. But in the first week or so, one of the very small children, because we had kids from, I think, a year up to 5. One of them had messed in their diaper, putting it nicely. And I said to the head teacher, do you want me to take her in and change her? And they said, I love that that's your first instinct, but you're not actually verified to be allowed to do that. So absolutely no problem. I totally understand. I will find someone who is allowed. You know, it is, these regulations are to protect our kids. You know, the future of our country. And he wants to go and gut the fucking regulations protecting them and their carers?
You probably
the
would sit down there and support.
regulations protect the children and the workers.
Yes.
Those are he wants to actually remove regulations that are standing in the way of the owners making profit.
You probably would have Tim Jargo changing kids' nappies if he had his way. Just put that into context.
Speechless.
Right. Anyway, let's
continue.
what else he's got to say on the matter.